The rain had stopped by the time I got home, but the world still smelled of it. Damp earth, wet asphalt, and something faintly metallic in the air. I walked into my quiet house, kicking off my shoes, telling myself that I needed to shake off whatever strange pull that ride with Ethan had left in me, but I didn't. Instead, I made tea I didn't really want, sat on the couch, and let my mind wander back to the way he'd looked at me. The way he'd said beautiful like it was a secret, only he knew. I told myself it was nothing. A harmless moment. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. The unexpected text was a Sunday evening, and I was sorting laundry when my phone buzzed. I expected it to be a reminder from my husband. He was still away on his trip, and our messages had been perfunctory at best. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart skipped. "Ethan, are you busy?" I hesitated, staring at the message. The safe answer would have been yes. But before I could think too much, my fingers moved on their own. "Not really?" "Why?" The reply came almost instantly. "I was hoping you could give me another ride, just across town. I'll buy you coffee after coffee." Innocent. Harmless. My pulse still quickened. "Sure. Where are you?" The second ride, when I pulled up to Lena's place, Ethan was already waiting outside, leaning casually against the railing. He looked different, not drastically, but enough that I noticed. His hair was damp, as if he'd just showered, and he was wearing a fitted dark sweater that did nothing to hide the way his shoulders filled it. He slid into the passenger seat with that easy confidence again, giving me a smile that felt like it had an unspoken "we both know why you're here" hidden in it. The ride started out like last time. Casual conversation, light teasing, but there was no denying the charge in the air. Every glance, every laugh felt like it carried a weight neither of us was acknowledging. The stop halfway to his destination. He asked if we could take a detour. "There's a park near here," he said. "I just need to grab something from a friend who's waiting there. Won't take long." I agreed, turning onto the quieter side street he directed me toward. The park was nearly empty, the wet grass glistening under the dim street lamps. Parked by the curb, expecting him to get out, but he DI'd single quotes team instead. He shifted in his seat to face me fully. "You've been on my mind since the other day," he said, his voice low, deliberate. I felt my breath catch. "Ethan, I know." He interrupted softly. "You're Lena's friend. You're married. There are rules." But he leaned in slightly. "Tell me you haven't thought about it too." The world outside seemed to fall away. No sound but the faint hum of the engine and my own heartbeat. I could have lied. Should have, but I didn't. The kiss started slow, a hesitation, a question in the space between us. And then, as if we'd both stopped thinking at the same time, he closed the gap. His lips were warm, tasting faintly of coffee and rain. The kiss deepened almost instantly. Years of unspoken boundaries collapsing all at once. My hands found his shoulders without me realizing it, feeling the solid warmth of him under the fabric. When we finally broke apart, the air inside the car felt different, charged, unsteady, alive. "This is dangerous," I whispered. He smiled, brushing his thumb over my cheek. "I know." The twist the ride to his destination after that was quiet, but not in a comfortable way. There was too much unsaid between us now. I dropped him off, and he lingered by the car for a moment, leaning down to meet my eyes. "See you soon," he said, like it was a promise. But the "what happened" part wasn't just the kiss. The real shock came 2 nights later, when Lena called. "I need to talk to you about Ethan," she said, her tone uneasy. My stomach dropped. "What about him?" There was a pause. "He's been seeing someone? Older? Married?" My mouth went dry. "Who told you that?" "He did," she said. "Well, kind of. He wouldn't give me her name, but he said It's serious. Claire, I'm worried. Whoever she is, she's going to get hurt. Or he is. I sat there, my fingers gripping the phone, my pulse thundering in my ears. She had no idea it was me. Not yet. The aftermath that night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every moment in the car, every glance, every word. It was reckless. It was wrong. And yet, some dark, hidden part of me wanted more. The what happened wasn't just that I kissed my best friend's younger brother. It was that in that kiss, I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and now, I didn't know if I wanted to. This part closes your title's promise with a dramatic, emotional payoff. The ride leads to undeniable physical tension. The kiss is the peak of the ride's hidden charge. The betrayal comes when the best friend unknowingly confides about the older married woman. It leaves your audience hanging in the perfect spot for either a follow-up episode or a lingering cliffhanger. There's a particular kind of tension that doesn't announce itself with loud noises or dramatic gestures. It creeps in quietly, threading itself into the smallest moments until you suddenly realize it's everywhere. That was exactly what's happening in my car that afternoon. Ethan was sitting in the passenger seat, his long legs stretched comfortably, one hand resting casually on his knee, the other draped along the side of the door. From the outside, it would have looked like a simple, ordinary ride. Two people, one familiar with the other, catching up after years apart. But to me, every detail felt heightened. His voice seemed lower, his laughter lingered longer, and his eyes were doing something I couldn't quite ignore. The shift had happened somewhere between Maple Street and the turnoff to the main road. The sky had grown darker, clouds pressing low as if threatening rain. And the air inside the car felt warmer, heavier. I had just made a comment about Lena's overprotective nature when he glanced at me sideways, a smirk playing on his lips. She still thinks I'm a kid, he said. I laughed. Well, that's what older sisters do. They freeze you at the age they first realize they had to take care of you. His smirk deepened. And you? Do you still think I'm a kid? The question landed heavier than it should have. I gripped the steering wheel just a little tighter. You've clearly grown up, I said, choosing my words carefully. Clearly, he repeated, his voice dropping into something almost teasing. The eyes, there's a look some people give. You that bypasses all the polite layers of conversation. Ethan gave me that look now, steady, searching, as if he were trying to read every thought in my head. I tried to keep my focus on the road, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of his gaze. You know, he said after a pause, Lena talks about you a lot. I said, keeping my tone light. Good things, I hope. Mostly, he replied, that smirk still tugging at his lips. She says you're smart, stubborn, and complicated. I raised an eyebrow. Complicated? He shrugged. Her word, not mine. I think it just means you're interesting. It was a small thing to say, but it landed like a spark in dry grass, quick, unexpected, and catching before I could stop it. The first crossing net, the next red light, I slowed to a stop. The rain had begun to fall in a fine mist, blurring the edges of the world outside. We were in that strange, suspended moment, no motion. Just the faint hum of the engine and the soft drumming of raindrops. Ethan turned toward me fully now. You really haven't changed that much, he said quietly. I glanced at him, intending to give a playful reply, but his expression stopped me. There was no teasing in his face now, just an intensity that made my breath catch. I mean, he continued, his voice low, you're still beautiful. My heart thudded in my chest. I told myself it was just a harmless compliment, but the way he said it, slow, deliberate, felt anything but harmless. The light turned green, pulling me back to motion. I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure what I could say. Without betraying the sudden heat curling in my stomach, the dangerous comfort we fell into a quieter conversation after that, but the tone had shifted. There was an awareness now, an invisible current running between us. Every time our hands brushed when I shifted gears, every time our eyes met in the reflection of the windshield, it felt charged. Somewhere deep down, a small voice reminded me of the facts. This was my best friend's younger brother. This was supposed to be a simple favor. This could so easily cross a line. But there was another voice too. Softer, but more persistent. The one that noticed how different he looked now. How his confidence felt magnetic. How easy it was to get lost in the warmth of his attention. The confession as we neared his destination, a small apartment complex on the other side of town. The rain had grown heavier. I pulled into the parking lot, but instead of immediately reaching for the door handle, he stayed seated, watching me. "Can I ask you something?" He said. "Sure." "Why did you say yes?" I frowned. "To giving you a ride?" He nodded. "You could have told Lena you were busy. Or you could have told me to call a cab, but you didn't." I hesitated, because I wanted to help. "That's all." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping again. "Is that really all?" Something about the way he asked it made my pulse quicken. I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came out. He smiled then, slow, knowing, and reached for the door handle. "I'll see you around, Claire." The aftermath, I watched him step out into the rain, his jacket darkening under the water. He didn't hurry. He walked with that same unshaken confidence, disappearing into the building without looking back. For a moment, I just sat there, my hands still on the steering wheel. The sound of the rain filling the silence. My heart was beating too fast for what had just been a simple car ride. But it wasn't just a car ride, and I knew it. Something had shifted between us in that short stretch of road, something subtle but undeniable. And the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about what might happen the next time we saw each other. This, you won't believe, moment isn't about the full twist yet. It's about the moment your audience realizes there's more going on under the surface than they first thought. It plants the seed of suspicion, attraction, and tension, so that when part 3 comes, the payoff feels both shocking and inevitable. It was a Thursday afternoon when the sky hung low and heavy, the kind of day that felt suspended between seasons. The late summer warmth still clung to the air, but a soft breeze hinted that autumn was coming. I was sitting in my kitchen, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone. My mind wasn't really on the screen. It was drifting, the way it often did when life felt too repetitive. Lately, my days had been a blur. Work, home, errands, and the occasional visit with friends, though those were becoming fewer and farther between. My husband had been traveling for business more than usual, and when he was home, he seemed distracted, almost distant. I kept telling myself it was just the stress of his job, but deep down, a part of me wondered if there was more to it. That quiet unease was like a pebble in my shoe, small but impossible to ignore. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. The name on the screen made me smile. Lena. Lena and I had been friends since college. We weren't the kind of friends who spoke every day, but when we did, it was as if no time had passed. She was warm, funny, and brutally honest when she needed to be. Over the years, we had celebrated each other's milestones, comforted each other through heartbreak, and shared countless secrets over bottles of wine. I answered with a cheerful, "Hey, stranger." "What's up, hey?" Lena's voice was breathless, like she was in a rush. "Listen, I'm in a bit of a situation. Could you do me a favor?" "Of course," I said automatically. "It's about my brother," she began. "Ethan. Well, his car broke down this morning and he needs a ride into town. I would take him myself, but I'm stuck at work, and I know you're not far from him." I blinked. "Ethan? I haven't seen him in years. Last time I saw him, he was what? 17, Lena laughed. Not anymore. He's 22 now, and trust me, he's not that awkward teenager you remember. He's been staying at my place while he sorts out his next move. Anyway, could you give him a lift? He asked, at the cafe on Maple Street. I hesitated for a beat. It wasn't that I didn't want to help. I'd always liked Ethan, in a distant, big sister kind of way. But something about the request caught me off guard. Still, I heard myself say, sure, no problem. Thanks, you're a lifesaver. I'll text you his number so you can let him know when you're on your way. We hung up, and a few seconds later, a text popped up on my screen. Ethan 5554917. I stared at the name for a moment before typing out a quick message. Hey, it's Claire. Your sister said you needed a ride. I can be there in about 15 minutes. Almost. Immediately, 3 dots appeared, and then his reply. Perfect. I'm at the table by the window. See you soon. Memories of the pastas. I grabbed my keys. Memories of Ethan as a teenager floated into my mind. I remembered him as lanky, shy, and always hovering on the edges of Lena's gatherings, a quiet observer. In a room full of loud 20-somethings, he'd blush easily when spoken to, and his eyes had that unguarded earnestness that made him seem younger than he was. I wondered what he was like now. Lena's comment about him not being awkward anymore echoed in my head. 22 wasn't that far from 17 in years, but in life experience, it could be worlds apart. People could change drastically in that time, especially men. As I drove toward the cafe, I found myself oddly curious. First sight, the little cafe on Maple Street came into view, its large front windows glowing warmly against the gray sky. I pulled into a parking space and spotted him almost instantly. He was sitting by the window, just as he'd said, wearing a dark jacket and a plain white t-shirt. But the Ethan I saw now was not the boy I remembered. His shoulders were broader, his jawline sharper, his posture relaxed but confident. His hair, a little longer than I remembered, framed his face in a way that made him look older, more self-assured. There was no trace of the shy teenager who used to avoid eye contact at Lena's parties. Instead, he looked up from his phone and met my gaze through the glass with a slow, easy smile. Something in my chest shifted, not quite recognition, but something else. Something I didn't have a name for. The greeting. I stepped inside, the doorbell chiming as I entered. The smell of coffee and baked goods wrapped around me. Ethan stood up immediately, towering over me by a few inches, and closed the distance between us with an easy stride. Claire, he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. It's been a while. Okay, I said with a small laugh. A long while. He leaned in slightly, brushing his lips against my cheek in a casual greeting, but there was a warmth to it that lingered longer than necessary. Thanks for coming, he said, his eyes holding mine just a fraction longer than they needed to. No problem, I replied, trying to ignore the strange flutter in my stomach. The ride begins. We walk to my car, and I noticed the way he carried himself, relaxed, confident, but with a kind of quiet focus, as if he was taking everything in. Once inside, I started the engine, and we merged into the light afternoon traffic. So, what happened to your car? I asked. He grinned. It decided it's done with me. Engine trouble. I'm going to have it towed later. Bad luck. I said. Maybe not, he replied, his tone playful. If it hadn't broken down, I wouldn't have gotten the chance to catch up with you. I glanced at him, half smiling. Smooth. He chuckled, but didn't break eye contact. Just honest. The unspoken tension as we drove, the conversation flowed easily about Lena. About his plans for the future, about little things we remembered from years ago. But beneath the words, there was an unspoken undercurrent, a subtle shift in the air between us. I told myself it was just because I hadn't seen him in so long that I was noticing the changes in him. But there was something else, something in the way he listened so intently when I spoke. In the way his eyes would flicker to my lips when I paused by the time we reached his destination. That pebble of unease in my chest had grown into something warmer, heavier, and far more complicated. And that was only the beginning.